Dear Excellencies, dear guests, I'm very pleased to see you, so many of you here tonight. My name is Tom Berger, and I'm the Managing Director of the Politforum Bern, and with me on stage is Yorgos Birtsubakis from the city of Bern. Today's event was organized in cooperation with the city of Bern and the Peace and Human Rights Division of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. I would like to express my sincere thanks for this excellent cooperation. Allow me to say a few words about the building we are in today. The tower is called the Käfigturm, which is translated as the cage tower, because it was a cage for almost 500 years. And today, fortunately, we are doing the exact opposite. We run this tower today as the Tower of Democracy. Our goal is to revitalize democracy and strengthen social cohesion. To achieve this goal, we organize discussion evenings such as today's. We have rooms that we make available free of charge for all kinds of political events, and we offer political education programs to school classes. Today we had over 100 school children from all over Switzerland in this tower. We also have an exhibition here in the tower which you can visit free of charge during our opening hours. Before we jump in today's topic, just two quick organization points. The whole event will be filmed and shown live on YouTube, and I warmly welcome also the people joining us online. And maybe you already noticed it, there is also a photographer with us today. Is there anybody who not wish to be photographed or filmed? Please raise your hand now so we know this. That seems not to be the case. Thank you very much. Second point, it's always important for us that also you, our audience, are able to participate. After the panel discussion, you will have the opportunity to ask questions or contribute to the discussion. Please raise your hands and please do only speak as soon as I'm with you with the microphone, because if not, the people in the live stream won't hear you. For those joining us online, you are able to ask your questions via the chat function there. For the welcome on behalf of the city of Bern, I give the floor to Yorgos Birtsubakis.
Thank you, Tom. Your Excellencies, dear guests, dear Ambassador Mitkova, dear Secretary General Casa Zamora, dear Procurator General Saavedra, dear Ambassador Enderlin. First of all, thank you for coming to the Politforum today to discuss this very important topic, which is the strengthening of democracy, as well as Switzerland's place in the corresponding international dialogue. I think we are all aware of how crucial such discussions are, especially in times when liberal democracy is being challenged all over the world. While a lot of attention is given to these challenges, rightfully, of course, we might forget to acknowledge that there are still millions, if not billions of people who are fighting for democracy every day, and that new forms of political participation, transparency and cooperation are emerging in many places. I'm therefore particularly glad that our dear guests will be discussing positive democratic developments like these tonight, and that before we will also be introduced to the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs Guidelines on Democracy. It is a real pleasure for me to welcome you also on behalf of the City of Bern and the Department of External Relations. Let me also say how pleased I am that the collaboration with the Politforum and the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs has led to tonight's event. Thank you very much. The City of Bern is regarded as one of the most democratic cities worldwide. For many years, we have had broad and inclusive forms of participation for all people living in our city. Within this framework, the Executive Council, the Bernese government, has decided to put a special emphasis on issues of democracy in its current legislative priorities. So as the city of Bern is committed to further engage in the promotion and the strengthening of democracy, tonight's event will be a first step in that direction. But there is certainly more to come from us in the next few years, so stay tuned. But let us now get back to tonight's program, and without further ado, I'm pleased to give the floor to Ambassador Tim Enderlin. Ambassador Tim Enderlin heads the Peace and Human Rights Division of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs since August of last year. In 1997, Ambassador Enderlin joined the Swiss Diplomatic Service, and since, his positions have included Deputy Head of Human Resources of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the Swiss Confederation, Regional Director of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation in Laos, and Ambassador of Switzerland to Myanmar. Please, Mr. Ambassador.
Tom and Horace for opening today's event and welcoming us here at the Käfingturm. It's quite a historic building, and I think, Tom, you mentioned it already, the Democracy Tower, as we like to name it, of course, as well, formerly known as the Käfingturm, a place that once served as a prison, but today stands as a symbol of public dialogue and civic participation. What a better metamorphosis can there be than this one? A warm welcome also to our distinguished panelists. I'm very much looking forward later on to be hearing from you. That's actually the main purpose, of course, of tonight, not to listening to me, but to be able to listen to you and insights. And I'm very much looking forward, as you do, to a rich discussion we will certainly have. But before that, let me quickly maybe introduce what it is about Switzerland, official Switzerland, and in particular my division, the Division for Peace and Human Rights within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and democracy and democracy promotion. And I think we all sense it. Democracy is under pressure. In recent years, we've seen growing polarization, declining trust in institutions, and a shrinking space for public debate. Not only in fragile democracies, I think we have to note that, but also in long-established ones. At the same time, new democratic energies are emerging. Citizens are experimenting with new forms of participation. Digital platforms are increasing transparency, but also spreading disinformation. And local communities are finding creative ways to make politics more inclusive. I hope that works. It does. No, it doesn't. Kannst du weitermachen, so springe ich durcheinander. For Switzerland, democracy is not just a system of government. It is part of who we are. Our own experience as a multilingual, multi-religious, and culturally diverse country has taught us that democracy is what holds us together. It gives every citizen a voice, creates legitimacy through participation, and thereby builds the trust needed to manage differences peacefully. And I would also like to add, I think what's important, that within our democratic system, we have learned on how to include the minority after a public referendum. Democracy has also shaped Switzerland's foreign policy identity. Our constitution and our laws make it clear that promoting democracy is one of the core tasks of our international engagement. In the Foreign Policy Strategy 2024 to 2027, the Federal Council identified strengthening democracy and governance as a foreign policy priority. To outline how Switzerland can contribute most effectively to strengthen democracy abroad, we developed the FDFA Guidelines on Democracy 2025-28. They were the first of their kind for Switzerland. We've brought some copies with us, and later on, please help yourself and take one, or if you want to, at home. For a long time, especially after the Cold War, democracy seemed to be on an unstoppable rise. The prevailing belief was that the arch of history was bent towards democratic governance. How wrong we all were. Today, the reality looks different. According to recent data, almost 40% of the world's population now lives in countries where democratic space is shrinking. We see elected leaders undermining checks and balances, disinformation corroding public debate, and societies divided by mistrust. In this new reality, we must acknowledge some hard truth. Given how much democracy is under pressure, clearly our methods and approaches have not been working properly. We need to rethink them. For example, it strikes us as evident that democracy promotion can no longer be a matter of bringing more democracy to the world. What we need today is to protect, renew, and strengthen democracy where it already exists. This is the key idea at the heart of our new guidelines, a shift from expanding democracy to strengthening democratic resilience. Strengthening democratic resilience is our main goal. This means the ability of a democracy to withstand pressure, to adapt, reform, and recover when challenged. It means institutions that are trusted and transparent. It means citizens who feel represented and who can participate meaningfully. And it means societies that can handle disagreement without breaking apart. But we also need to rethink some of the tools that we are using. The guidelines identify two main ways Switzerland aims to strengthen democratic resilience, and you see that with this beautiful house on the slide. First, it is by reinforcing the institutional and societal foundations of democracy. This includes much of the work Switzerland has already been doing in supporting a free and independent media, an impartial justice system, free and fair elections, and genuine opportunities to participate in shaping their future. Switzerland supports these foundations through initiatives such as the International Fund for Public Interest Media, IFPIM, which promotes public interest media through election observation missions and through partnerships with courts and parliaments. A new tool that our guidelines lay out and that is at the core of the work of my division is what we have come to call diplomacy for democracy. This is the second pillar of Swiss engagement to strengthen democratic resilience. Today's challenges are mostly political. Democracies tend to erode from the top. And when they manage to U-turn, it is also due to the persistence of key democratic institutions or processes. This is why we want to use our diplomatic channels more actively. We want to engage in international forums, raising democracy issues in political dialogue and addressing democratic backsliding. A tool that we believe is urgently needed today is the building of stronger and more inclusive partnerships. Democracy support work cannot be the task of a few Western countries only. To be credible and effective, it must be global and based on partnership. Switzerland will therefore work with a broad range of actors, from like-minded governments to civil society, academia, and organizations such as International IDEA. Our goal is to figure as a catalyst for new alliances for democracy, grounded in mutual respect and shared learning. The state of democracy worldwide may look discouraging at times. But if there is one lesson from Switzerland's own experience, it is that we know that democracy is never accomplished. It's a constant process of negotiation and renewal, from the federal level down to the communal assembly. Our democracy is resilient because we care for it, invest in it, and we make it our own. I look forward to discussing with our distinguished guests how we can strengthen democracies together, what are some of the challenges, but also to look at some positive developments. At the end of this discussion, and I think that's essential also if we talk about democracy and participation, we will open the floor for questions from the audience, so to make sure that we also get your insight from the distinguished audience. With this, thank you very much. This was the introduction I wanted to give you so far on the democratic guidelines we are having. I think we now have a short rebuild of the stage here, and then we immediately go into our panel discussion. Thank you very much, everyone. Once again, a very good evening to everyone. And as I said before, we are now coming to the main part of this evening and looking forward to the discussion we will having with three very distinguished panelists. And I'm happy to welcome on stage Kevin Casas Zamora. Dr. Kevin Casas Zamora has been the Secretary General of the Stockholm-based International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, in short, International IDEA, since August 2019. He's the former Vice President of Costa Rica and served as Minister of National Planning. He also serves as a Senior Fellow at the Inter-American Dialog, a policy research center in Washington, D.C., and has taught at various universities. Veronika Mitkova is the Director of Human Rights and Transition Policy Department at the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs. With a PhD in International Economic Relations and a career that includes service under President Václav Havel and leadership at the NGO People in Need, she has been engaged in supporting human rights and democratic transformation both in Europe and beyond. Since December 2024, Veronika also serves on the Executive Committee of the European Endowment for Democracy, helping to strengthen civil society and independent media across the region. And Julio Saavedra he's the Procurador General de la Nación of Guatemala, a lawyer, notary public, and university professor with over 2 decades of experience. He has advised both the public and private sector and represented Guatemala before international bodies, including the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Most recently, he submitted Guatemala's request for an advisory opinion on the right to democracy. Quite a revolutionary approach, and I think we all are very keen to hear maybe later on a little bit more about this milestone initiative within the Inter-American system. So thank you again for being with us, and let's kick off, and let's do that with Kevin. Kevin, International IDEA provides one of the most comprehensive assessments of democracy worldwide. Many observers note that democratic space is shrinking in several regions, even in established democracies. From International IDEA's perspective, how serious is this trend? And what does it tell us about where democracy is resilient and maybe where it is not, and where it is most vulnerable, actually? Do you see examples of democratic resilience we can learn from?
Well, thank you very much, Tim, for the kind introduction. Let me start, as I should, with thanking the organizers of this forum, Politforum, the City of Bern, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and let me also say how pleased I am to share the stage with Veronika and Julio. We Central Americans are overrepresented here by some margin because it's a small region, but there you go. It is really a joy to be here with all of you. I mean, thank you all for coming to share this discussion with us. To your question, and Tim, look, the shrinking civic space is a reality. I mean, we detect this in the measurements that we have about the quality of democracy globally. Every year, International IDEA publishes a report on the global state of democracy. I won't bore you with the details, but it's a very detailed piece of research.
And very good one.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. You know, I was kicking her under the chair. Thank you so much for that. It's a very detailed piece of information based on a sea of data that goes through a very, I would like to think, sophisticated methodological sift, as it were, and is very good at detecting trends when it comes to democratic performance. It covers 173 countries, over 150 indicators of political behavior and development, going all the way back to 1975. So it's very good for spotting trends. And what we see in the latest iteration of the report is, which came out a couple of months ago, is a very sobering picture. As sobering as this is the 9th year in a row where more countries in the world, out of those 173 covered by the report, more countries see their democratic performance deteriorate than those countries that see their democratic performance improve. And that sequence of 9 years is the longest we've seen over half a century. Not just that, if you take the 173 countries, over 50% of them have experienced a very severe decline over the past 5 years in at least one crucial democratic element in the democratic construct. In some cases, it's the ability to hold credible elections. In some cases, it's protection to press freedom. In some cases, is the quality of civic space. It varies depending on the country, but at least one crucial democratic factor has been severely affected over the past 5 years. If you take back the clock 1 decade, that proportion was around a third of countries. So that alone gives you an idea of how widespread the deterioration in the quality of democracy is and how rapidly it is advancing. I mean, I could go on giving you factoids. I encourage you to check out the report. It's available online. One important, to your question, Tim, one important finding in this report, and this truly one of the very few pieces of good news in this, but not an insignificant one, is that although the quality of civic space is declining, that is, the protections that legal systems grant civil society to operate, I mean, that's being affected across the board in negative ways. Despite this, civic activism remains remarkably robust all over the world. If you take all the indicators that we use to measure democracy, we group those indicators in 4 big pillars: representation, rule of law, rights, and participation. And the only one of those pillars that remains reasonably robust in the world is participation. And it's not due to what happens with electoral participation, which is actually going down on average. Over the past 15 years, average electoral participation has declined by about 10%. Is civic activism. Is the fact that people remain committed to standing up for their rights as they see them and going out on the street if they need to do that. And I guess this is not random. I mean, part of the story here is that the decline, which is very visible in our numbers, the decline in the quality of traditional representative institutions is driving people to channel their demands in different ways, through civic activism, fundamentally. The fact of the matter is that this is one of the few pieces of good news that we have, but it's not an insignificant one. I think what we are seeing in places like Indonesia, like Nepal, like Kenya, just the past weekend in Mexico, somewhat surprisingly, is social movements often led by young people that are demanding more democracy, because this is the remarkable thing. All these movements do not demand doing away with democracy, quite to the contrary. They demand better democratic governance. So, all in all, despite the rather gloomy picture that we see globally, there are, a few glimpses of hope that we should try to nurture as much as we can. And, hopefully, although this civic activism is not enough to renew the democratic project, is very important nonetheless.
Thank you very much. Kevin, thank you also for highlighting, and I think that's important, also positive developments or developments that we can and should continue to see as positive. In the end, it's always about people and what people want, and I think we all know that if democracy is declining worldwide, what people want is to live in a democratic system, and we see that all over the world. You have cited these examples. I've lived that in Myanmar myself after the military coup, where it was all about we want our democracy back. And I think that's also where we should then probably look into, and how can we actually support that. Veronica, you come from a country, the Czech Republic, whose democratic transition is rather recent, if I may say, or relatively recent at least, with the end of the Cold War. And you live in a country now that has built resilient democracy. I think we can say that.
Hopefully.
From your perspective, you will tell us more, but from your perspective, what have been the key factors that have helped the Czech Republic democracy to become strong? And related to that, where do you see potential challenges? You recently have had elections. What does that mean, and how do you look
I'm a civil servant,
Yeah.
I wait for the political representatives to come to the government. But anyway, yes, we do have relatively young democracy. Only yesterday we celebrated 36th anniversary of so-called Velvet Revolution, when our students came to the streets and started to the Velvet Revolution and the societal change in my country. So it's 36 years, almost 2 generations, I would say now. What I would like to highlight are 3 things which I think make democracy strong in my country, but also elsewhere. First are strong institutions. And here I find very important 2 things. It's the balance of power and checks and balances. So that's something which I find very important. We are a medium-sized country, and we have a parliament with 2 cameras, I'm afraid that my hair does not cooperate with this microphone. Sorry for that. Yeah, thank you. That's much better. So I think that we are relatively or medium-sized country. We have parliament with 2 cameras. We have directly elected president. We have quite strong judicial system, and all these institutions, they are elected in different time cycles and with different patterns. So that's something which is pretty important, and that has been working for my country, I think. The second thing that I would like to stress is free media. This is something which is important for democracy as well. We have a very good public broadcasters, TV and radio. When I will be speaking about, for example, Reporters Without Borders Free Media Index, we ranked the 10th place in 2025. Switzerland was the 9th. So this is just give you the impression. You're still a little bit better, but just a little bit. So I think that free media is something which is very important. And the third thing is what you mentioned just a few moments ago, and it's a very strong civil society, thriving and living civil society, because this is something which is also, to me, very important to keep democracy going. People do not afraid go to street. It's only a few years ago when there were some kind of populist movements in my country, and there were hundreds of thousands of people going to the streets expressing their will, and that they are not satisfied with the involvement. And that time the government and the president had to step back and return on the track. So these are the things that I would like to, 3 things that I would like to mention. Strong institutions, checks and balances, free media, and strong civil society. And what I see as a danger, it's the overall situation all around us, you know, which of course inspires our politicians and our systems as well. You mentioned that international idea counts 9 years where there are more countries deteriorating the situation rather than improving. There are organizations which are even stricter. For example, Freedom House speak about 19 years of that kind of improvement or disimprovement. And I really like VDEM Institute, which says that there are a lot of indexes, and you mentioned 150 indexes that you have in your studies. But VDEM Institute made it very simple and said that if it should compare the state of democracy in the world now in 2025 is the same as in 1986, which would not be a good news for my country, because we were at that time still a communist country under the Soviet sphere of interest. So they say that on one hand it is bad news because the democracy is deteriorating all around the world, and there are no exceptions. But on the other hand, it's still better than in most of the people's history. So we have to see something positive in that, but it's not a positive trend at all. So this is the danger also to my country, because of course authoritarian regimes, they inspire themselves. They use the same means. And it's very easy now in a global war to inspire ourselves. So that's from my part.
Veronica, if I may just on this last point you mentioned, and you also said the environment that is surrounding us and of course influencing us, and not always to the better, unfortunately, we know that. It's the simple truths that are not always the real truth, that we are getting. Your division, and I would imagine exactly for that reason, as we also do, you support other countries in their democratic transitions. Very briefly, can you tell us on how or what do you focus on to ensure that these transitions can be as long-term and stable as possible? And maybe you have a concrete example even.
Yeah, we are talking about Transition Promotion Program. That's a program that we decided to repay all the support we received during the communist times to the people around us. It celebrated 20 years this year. It's a program which is, I hope, successful. I want to see it successful. Even OECD suggested that it's a best practice how to support human rights and democracy worldwide, so I'm very proud on that. What is essential and how to make it as sustainable as possible, it must be the ownership of the projects that we support must be with the people in the countries where they are realized. You know, it's up to them to decide what kind of future they want for their country. We help to empower them. We want to allow them to have all the rights that they do have according to the international covenants. But it's up to them what they need. So we do the bottom-up projects. They submit, they suggest any area they want to do it, and then we support them. In one area which it's very unique as well is that we support grassroots initiatives. So it's really like new initiatives that react on the actual need. And these are the institutions or organizations that are not well established yet, and sometimes they are unable to reach the money. So I'm very pleased that we have incubated that way several very well established now organizations or media outlets in Europe. So, and one suggestion, in one of the Eastern European country, we helped to build a network of watchdogs all around the country. And in each watchdog group, there were like 3 people, at least 3 of them. One was a lawyer, one was a journalist, and one was an activist. And they kind of, checked the work of the local municipalities, which I think is very important. So this is just to give you substance on what we do, but we also work in the most restrictive regimes on the planet, including Myanmar. So, but that's something, these projects are different from democracy support. This is really like support to human rights defenders.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you also for putting things into very concrete perspectives. I think that's very helpful if you want to understand how does democracy work look like and what can it produce. Julio, you're a lawyer, so of course I have to ask you a question that goes into, or that takes account of your professional background. When democratic backsliding occurs, one of the first things attacked often is the dependence of the courts and the legitimacy of justice systems. They're often instrumentalized by autocratically inclined leaders to weaken checks and balances. We heard from how important checks and balances are before. How do you see the connection between a robust rule of law and a strong democracy?
Well, it's essential. I mean, following on Veronica's participation, she said that her democracy or her country's democracy relies on a very strong institutions. But the question is how you build strong institutions. At the core of every democracy, and I'll say every republic that depends on checks and balances, there is to be a very independent judicial system. And not only thinking about judges, but prosecutors and all the institutions within the judiciary, they all need to work in an independent way. Guatemala has been living a reversal on this matter for at least the last 3 years or so. Maybe the most important thing that the actual administration of President Arevalo is facing right now is because of not having an independent judiciary, where you have judges, criminal judges, trying to annul the results of the general elections in 2023. And this might explain why we are fighting for our democracy right now in a very complex surrounding, and the intentions of some anti-democratic actors trying to bring up autocratic leaders to take charge of the presidency. So also the instrumentalization of the judiciary. You have in Guatemala, you have journalists, you have prosecutors, you have lawyers that are human rights defendants that are just are forced into exile just because they were fulfilling their duties, which was doing their jobs and trying to fight against a non-independent judiciary. So this is a very important thing, and it resumes the importance and the connection between the rule of law and democracy. Also, Guatemala has been facing all the characteristics of a lawfare that needs to come to an end. The abuse of criminal law and the instrumentalization of cases of prosecution against judges, prosecutors, human rights defenders, and mainly also public servants, high-profile public servants that need to go to exile. So this is a very grave situation right now in Guatemala. They are forced into exile, and this is tragic for a democracy or the democratic process. Also, having a non-independent judiciary lets autocratic actors to make the justice system as a weapon and retaliation. In what is obvious to everybody in Guatemala, that these are mainly politically motivated cases against, as I said, judges, prosecutors, high-profile civil servants. So this has not been just noted by civil society, but also by a United Nations Special Rapporteur on freedom of lawyers and judges. She recently presented her preliminary findings, noting that Guatemala is in a pivotal juncture right now, which is it needs to have a revision of all the judiciary and try to fight it back from where it stands right now. And right now we are facing, in the next 8 months or so, we're facing a second-grade elections, which means that high courts, such as the Constitutional Court, the General Prosecutor's Office, the office in charge of elections, are going to be renewed. And this is according to law, it goes through a nomination commission process. So we need to be very, very careful in making the right people to participate in this nominations, and try to avoid bad actors or people with a bad track record to participate in this process. I want to emphasize something very important. Guatemala is facing these challenges, but it's not giving up. It's on the opposite. We are in our duties, in my current office right now, in my current post, we're trying to fight back against all these anti-democratic actors. And this is doing so in criminal cases. We need to try to bring justice to the people that's being prosecuted, and not just or try to dismantle this the narrative against prosecutors, judges, and journalists, because it erodes our democracy. Imagine having almost 3 or 4 years of a journalist in prison without facing a judge day right now. He's in a provisional prison, which is illegal, absolutely. And this is very bad, and we need to face it, and we need to change it, and that's what we are trying to do right now. And also, we're trying to make the international community to go along with us and observe these processes, because we are right now, what is at stake, it's probably the future of our country for the next 15 years. And this is so because, for example, the electoral authorities that are going to be appointed next year will be in charge of the next 2 general elections, which means 8 years of government authorities, which is crucial to us. So it all depends. Also, the General Prosecutor's Office, which has done a lot of harm to our system, to our rule of law, and to our judiciary, since many cases are politically motivated. And so this has to come to an end, because what this does for us as a society is that it polarizes us, and we need to end it. We need to end the lawfare, we need to end the criminalization, and we need to bring together the positions and try to solve our problems through consensus and make our system, our rule of law and our system of laws trying to be enforceable through consensus and not through authority. So we need to build up on these basic democratic institutions, and it's all through an independent judiciary. As long as you have a strong judiciary system, all other rights are guaranteed.
Please, Kevin.
Can I say something about the rule of law and democracy?
Please, if it's short, brief.
No, it's not going to be short. So I mean, you know, it's not going to be.
Go on, you got 1 minute.
I'll take a little bit more. I mean, look, the rule of law is fundamental for democracy. I mean, one of the fundamental tests for a democracy, one of the fundamental tests for the viability of social life in general, is when someone that has a dispute with his or her neighbor chooses to take him to court rather than shoot him. Right? Because he or she knows that her rights will be adequately protected by the courts and by the law. And there are 2 implications to this. Number one, a historical implication. And here I'm going to paint with a broad brush. Roughly speaking, democracies in the North Atlantic, you know, Europe, US, Canada, but also, you know, those that are relatives of, you know, this group like Australia or New Zealand, they had rule of law before they had universal suffrage. In my part of the world, our part of the world, that sequence has been reversed. We've had universal suffrage before the rule of law was anywhere close to being guaranteed. And what that does to your democracy is that it makes it far more likely that a democracy riddled with impunity and power abuse emerges. A democracy where people does not necessarily feel that their rights are being protected, and hence are much more liable to turn against democracy. And that has a further implication, which is that if what I'm saying is approximately true, you were talking about supporting transitions. my impression, and that will come as a surprise, if I say it, working as I do on elections day in and day out, my impression is that if you want to build lasting democracies, if you want to support democratic transitions, it's much more important to invest in putting in place the basic bricks of the rule of law than investing in elections. Elections are the instant gratification part of the process to build a democracy. The real deal is the rule of law and the protection of rights. And this is easier said than done, because whenever I say this, I'm reminded of a quip attributed to former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. They were talking about rule of law and so on, and he said, look, guys, when we talk about establishing the rule of law in a country, what you need to remember is that the first 500 years are the hardest. And I guess what that means is that all the more reason to start as soon as possible.
Thank you, Kevin, for making this important point and for having made it in 90 seconds. But maybe briefly going back to Julio, I mentioned at the beginning, it was your office who recently submitted this question to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, whether there exists a right to democracy. And listening to both of you now, I think we can so feel where this question comes from and where the importance in it lies. Can you explain us a little bit more on that move and how recognizing such a right could help protect democracy today and counter the backsliding?
Absolutely. We're not giving up on democracy. We've been living in a democracy for the last 40 years. It's been it's hard. It had its ups and downs, but this is the way we want to live, and this makes sense. And we need to try to reinforce our right to democracy, and we need to give it content. We need to clarify. We need to try to get the international standards of what is democratic and what isn't. And we think in my office and in Guatemala, and also it's President Arevalo's thinking that through an advisory opinion before the Inter-American Human Rights Court, this would be possible. It's trying to bring up multilateralism and try to make this conversation and try the Inter-American Court to give us clarification and content to this right to democracy. So it's not trying to make an international obligation, but clarification, interpretation, start talking about it. You can notice in the region, as Mr. Casas or Kevin was Kevin, yeah. He pointed out, we have a very interesting region in Central America. We've got El Salvador's process right now, which is obviously a reversal of a democratic process and institutions, and they had their troubles, and I don't think they have a freedom of expression. I'm not saying in Guatemala we have the example or the best way to fulfill it, but I mean we need to start talking about it, and we need content of this right to democracy, and we hope that the Inter-American Human Rights Court can do a great job in this in an objective manner. So we think we are confident that this would contribute to the discussion and mainly the clarification of how to establish these limits or what can we understand of a democratic system and how to defend it. Are the countries obliged or to guarantee a democratic process? How a country does that, and whom are the entitled to go before a court and try to to bring justice about this this right. So it's a very important advisory opinion for us right now, and we think it's going to make a great impact on what we understand right now in the region of democratic process and as a right.
Interesting. Can you maybe just tell us what's your guess? How much time will it take for the court to come up with this advisory opinion?
Well, we think it's going to be within the next year. The hearing would take place, we think, on March next year, and we think that before 2026 ends, we might get a response from the Inter-American Court.
Looking forward
so
it's
good news. It's good news because it demonstrates that we are not giving up on democracy. We're trying to defend it, and we believe in multilateralism, which is also important.
Thank you, and thank you to the three of you. I promised in the beginning that we would also like to open, of course, the floor and having the audience also expressing itself. There is microphones around, I think. Who would like to ask a question, having a comment? Please feel free. There is one question here in front.
The right to vote is fundamental for democracy. In most countries, including Switzerland, is limited to nationals, to those who have the passport. I have a question to all of you. What do you think about improving democracy by giving the right to vote to foreigners, to residents who do not have the passport?
Thank you. We'll take a second one immediately here in front.
Thank you. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that I fully support the idea of rule of law. But given that possibly, or very likely, democracy is being eroded from the top, and that we have active civic participation, how are we going to ensure a peaceful transition? Because in the time in between, there's going to be a tremendous conflict of interests.
Thank you. Do we have another one?
This one
yes, over there, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. I'd like to know what kind of multilateral, international mechanisms do you think can be used to promote democracy? You've mentioned the Inter-American Court for judicial opinion, but what kind of multilateralism, political mechanisms at the UN level, in Geneva, for example, or in New York, do you think can be used to advance democracy in the multilateral affairs? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we do a first round of answers here. The first one was on the right to vote, which is in many countries limited to nationals, at least at the national level. What's your opinion on this, and what insights do you have here? Who wants to kick off?
I mean, I can have a crack at that one. I mean, look, in some countries, not few, non-citizens are allowed to vote in local elections. I don't know, by the way, if that's the case in Switzerland.
Partly.
It is?
Partly, yes.
Okay. There you go. I mean, and it happens in a number of places. Whether foreigners should or should not be allowed to vote in a national election, of course, as you may imagine, this is extremely sensitive from the political standpoint. I mean, I hesitate to think that from a normative standpoint, there's an obvious solution to this conundrum. I mean, ultimately, it's a political decision that a country needs to make about who belongs to the polis, right? I don't think that there's a normative, an abstract normative solution to this. It's a function of the political process, that is, ultimately makes that decision. But let it be stipulated that in a number of countries, at least at the local level, that possibility does exist.
Any addition, Veronica?
Very shortly, that's the case of my country, that residents, non-citizens can vote in the municipal elections to be able to participate on the local level. And I don't see too much demand for change, at least in my country, to move it also to the national level. What we did this year, it was something different. We had, for the first time for the parliamentary elections, Czechs living abroad were able to vote correspondent way, so they didn't need to go only to the embassy, but they were able to send their vote to the embassies. And it was quite interesting to see that that was not overwhelming interest of Czechs living abroad to that option, and that the number of people voting before and now abroad didn't change too much.
Can I add something really
Again, 1
quick?
minute.
No, less than that, actually. I mean, one interesting example, and I'm quoting here off the top of my head, but if I recall correctly, in Mauritius, which happens to be a member state of IDEA, nationals from other countries in the Commonwealth are allowed to vote in the national election. Don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive that that's the case. Whether this exists in other countries that are members of the Commonwealth, I don't know, but I'm almost certain that it does exist in Mauritius. Check it out.
Yeah, in Guatemala we have at the municipal level, non-residents or non-citizens, can participate in the discussion, and they can vote in a very peculiar process, which is not an electoral process but a municipal one, in the decisions that most matter at the municipal level. But they cannot vote or participate in political activity in the national level and in the general elections, and neither they can in an election for the municipal corporation. But they can only participate in decisions, or in talking and in discussing the social problems that they have or that they face. And it's kind of like an advisory assembly, let's say, to put it that way, but they cannot exercise a vote in a general election. And I don't think it would be soon.
I can continue with you when we look into the second question, which was on how to ensure a peaceful transition.
Well, yeah, again, rule of law. And within rule of law, I'd say, because understanding the rule of law as a mechanism that enforces and gives you a warranty that all your freedoms and all your rights are going to be respected in a society. But you cannot have a rule of law if you don't have an independent judiciary. So for me, to have a peaceful transition, you need to have a rule of law, to respect the laws, because Guatemala and I'm sure the modern societies are countries where the system is a system of norms, a system of laws. So rule of law, respecting what the law states, and I mean the society, the civil society needs to be always present and observing that these processes go according to the law. And that would be my answer.
Maybe we turn to the third question, which was on the international mechanisms that are needed or maybe already in place to advance democracy. Who would like to go into that? Veronica, you want to start?
There are a lot of global and regional organizations that can play the role. If they do, it's another question. But they can play the role. And of course, Switzerland is presiding over the Human Rights Council this year, which is the most important body of the United Nations on human rights. So this is like also Switzerland taking responsibility for that part. So I think that we do have institutions that could play that role. but they are not doing so very well because of many reasons. You know, they are blocked. Just take the Organization for Security and Economic Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, which you will be presiding next year. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm not mean, really. That could be an excellent organization for promoting democracy, but for the last few years it's been blocked by Russia and some other states. So we do have the organization there. And I'm afraid that any other organization which would be created now under the recent global situation would not be better than what we already have at our disposal. So we need to use it. We need to use it properly, but it's there.
Can I say something about this? I fully agree with what Veronica is saying. I will add two things. I mean, number one, that it is true that many international organizations have what we call democratic clauses, whereby member states of those organizations are obliged to observe democratic principles, and in principle can be sanctioned in different kinds of ways if they don't abide by those principles. Political stalemate is one part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is that in most cases, and I'm speaking here particularly in the case of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which I know well, those democratic clauses were designed and drafted for the kinds of violations to democracy that existed in years past. I mean, democratic breakdowns used to be very clear-cut. I mean, in Latin America, there would be a military coup or an insurrection. That's no longer the case. The way in which democracy is eroded today is in a very gradual fashion, often set in motion by governments that were democratically elected. And it's very difficult to know when the Rubicon is crossed. And that has really made it very difficult for it to invoke and apply those democratic clauses. I mean, you only have to see the EU tied up in knots in trying to deal with Hungary, right? So this is one fundamental problem. I mean, those democratic clauses need to be rethought for the kind of real threats to democratic governance that we're seeing today. And the second point is about the other role that multilateral organizations can play, which I think is, you know, one of the things that at least international idea tries to play, which is try to become platforms for peer-to-peer learning in a way that helps to improve the performance of democratic institutions in the countries that participate in those platforms.
Veronica.
But I wanted to return to the previous question, the peaceful transformation. It can be done, and the Czech Republic is an evidence of it. We don't only peacefully transfer from communist country to hopefully democratic country, but we also peacefully split from Czechoslovakia to Czech Republic and Slovakia. You know, I don't know if it's about our nature, if it's about our natural. Maybe we fight only in pubs, but it is possible.
Or soccer stadiums.
Or ice hockey or whatever.
No, I'd just like to add technical assistance. What can be done? Technical assistance, dialogue, bring the space to bring discussions about how to make consensus, how to deal with problems, how to make those 500 hard years easier. And this there's many things that can be done through assistance in as I said, technical assistance. And also a comment on the decline of democracy. Stephen Levitsky describes it very well. it comes from the top towards downward, and it doesn't happen anymore through coup d'etat, but through the elected authorities that go undermining, the rule of law, and try to exclude and try to have opaque decisions, and this can be prevented and has to be prevented. So those are my two takes on that.
It'll be a slow process which suddenly becomes very fast. Yeah. I think we have time for another round of questions. Who would like to take the floor?
Hi, good evening. So I just want a quick question for Mr. Zamora. What are the main opportunities for expanding the Alliance for Development in Democracy to the broader Latin America and the Caribbean region? And how could partners such as Switzerland contribute to strengthening this regional democratic initiative? Thank you.
Got another one here.
Thank you for the chance. My name is Widodo from Indonesia. I have two short questions. The first is perhaps a bit related to the previous questions, but I would like to pose this question to Ambassador Tim. Since you mentioned regarding with the democracy guidelines 2025 and 2028, and my question is, how does the FDFA plan to operationalize these guidelines in its bilateral and also multilateral engagement, especially with partners beyond Europe? And the second one is regarding future-proofing democracy. What actually global priorities should democracies focus on the coming decade to ensure resilience and adaptability in the face of technological disruption and shifting geopolitical dynamics? Thank you.
Have another one.
Yes, thank you first for your deliberations up to here. It's very interesting to listen. I learned something, and that is, in spite of the dark clouds on democracy at the horizon, there is one strong pillar, and that is civic resistance, resilience, and also courage. If we look at the States, why don't we see glimpses of this civic resistance in the US, in a country where we have demontage of democracy in highest speed ever?
That's a tricky question, I think, towards the end. Then let's maybe first dwell into Kevin. The first question was for you.
Well, thank you for the questions and comments, first of all. I mean, just for the, in the interest of informing the audience, the Alliance for Democracy has been, or was, and I hesitate to call it an informal alliance because there was some formality to it, created by Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic to align their positions when it came to issues of democracy, human rights, rule of law in international fora, which was a very interesting and welcome development because, here you had, three small democracies trying to do something to advance the democratic cause. At a moment when precisely the international fora that were entrusted with the task of defending democracy were not operating in the way they should, right? Well, that's the good news. The bad news is that as far as I can tell, I might be behind in the news, but as far as I can tell, the Alliance for Democracy barely has a pulse, right? At this point, it no longer exists. And I don't see any appetite in Latin America to reproduce this kind of effort on the part of any country, quite frankly. I mean, and there are a zillion reasons for that. I mean, my impression is that governments in Latin America are very occupied with their own problems. I mean, they are loath to pass judgment on the political affairs of other countries. It's very difficult to see that happening. I mean, it only happens very rarely. One of the positive examples in which countries have been willing to come forth and express an opinion on political events in other countries happened in Guatemala. I think that the many Latin American countries were very forceful in expressing their opinion about the attempt on the part of corrupt political forces to prevent President Arevalo to be sworn in. But that happens very, very rarely and only around specific issues. I mean, the notion that some kind of ad hoc pro-democracy alliance will emerge in Latin America, I find it very, very difficult to imagine.
And if I can, if I may elaborate on that, as hard as it seems, it just happened again. Guatemala had the support of a resolution of the Organization of American States just 2 weeks ago, and it was defending our democracy, because again, a criminal judge tried to annul the results, not only in 2023 but right now. I'm saying three weeks ago, and the Organization of American States passed a resolution in support of our democratic process. So it can happen. We are right now willing to defend our democratic process and institutions, and we're gonna be successful in that.
Thank you.
I'm sure.
On briefly, maybe on the democratic guidelines and how Switzerland intends, put them into practice. That's the way I understand the question. And I think it's all about the different instruments we are having, be it the diplomatic ones, but also development cooperation. And let's not forget, when we talk about democracy, what Switzerland has been doing for many, many years and continues doing is working on governance and local governance. So that's only one part of the engagement Switzerland is having. The other, and that's more in the I would put it, the so-called typical countries we work in with our development cooperation, the bilateral development cooperation. What's new with these guidelines is that we also now want to work in countries that are under duress when it comes to democratic development, or where you have emerging democracies. And that's very much, and also more at the political and diplomatic level. It's not actually as a donor you work there, it's more as a kind of an actor where you try to support a democratic process that has come somehow under stress, or where you want to support in how to promote an emerging democracy, and how exactly can you do that. There are, of course, different means. I think we don't need to go in all the details, but as I said before, it's all the diplomatic instruments that you're having that can even start with, in the frame of a political dialogue, for instance. There can be specific initiatives which the section in my division who is taking care of that is actually promoting. And I think what we have here, and maybe that's an interesting information, so far we have 2 senior experts on democracy. We have deployed them in Costa Rica for Latin America, and the other one in Warsaw for the OSCE region. I think both for obvious reasons, and they are there, our antennas, our ears and eyes, to look into how does development be in the region, what kind of initiative support can be taken there by Switzerland, and thus ensuring also that we're really close to the context as such, and not just dealing with it from far away Switzerland. But you had another second question, amongst others, on ensuring resilience. I don't know who wants to, Veronica, you want to dwell into that one?
I would like to answer two questions, or not answer, rather make a comment on two questions. First of all, even regional cooperation can be a challenge and can be difficult. And trust me that coordination within the EU 27 country states, relatively like-minded, is not always easy and takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. Sometimes we do not have then time and energy for the others as well. So it is a challenge, even coordinate in the region. But what you see more and more is that there are alliances created on specific topics and through the regions. You know, so it's not only one region that is submitting certain resolution, but these are the countries that the topic is of their interest from all the regions. And the digital context, this is something which is very important, and we find it very important. And I'm a little bit nervous today because we have the Czech-led resolution in United Nations General Assembly most probably being voted today, which is on human rights in digital contexts. And it's very first resolution. For the first time, we presented it 2 years ago, and it was consensual. This year, it will be most probably voted. Which the resolution says that the rights that are offline should be respected online as well. And that's something which is, and it has a lot of paragraph on very specific issues, but more general idea behind it is that offline rights should be applied online as well.
The third, I mean, you're not going to let the question about the U.S.
No, certainly not. I'll come back on that.
Come on.
But I thought you wanted to say something on this here. No? Oh, you wanted to roll into the U.S. question.
I'm raging to say something.
How many minutes do you need for that?
No. A couple of minutes at most. But yeah, I am. Am I allowed?
Sure, please. We're all waiting for you.
Look, the U.S. I think I would say most people are shocked, I certainly am, by the speed of the deterioration of the democratic performance of the US, right? However, I think you're being a bit too harsh. There is some civic resistance. I mean, we've seen glimpses of that. Probably less, almost surely less than we would have expected. But some glimpses of resistance. I mean, you had the No Kings demonstrations, which were not insignificant. That's the single largest act of protest in the history of the United States. That's not insignificant. You have, you know, in a different sphere, judges are trying to do what they can to hold the line. So there are pockets of resistance. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, you had voters going to the polls and expressing their opinion in elections that were free and fair. And this last point is vital and allows me to say a broader point, to make a broader point. We were saying before that democracies break down now in a different way. They break down in through a gradual process, and you never really know when the line is crossed. I'll give you a rule of thumb. A rule of thumb to know when the Rubicon has been crossed. To me, a democracy stops being a democracy when meaningful political change is no longer possible through the ballot box. That's the difference between, I don't know, India, where political change was possible through the ballot box, and Venezuela, where it wasn't. And the practical implication of this is that one thing that we must observe very, very closely in the US is what happens with the midterms. If the midterms are distorted in such a way that only one result is allowed, then at that point we'll know that we are dealing with something completely different. I don't know what will happen. There is, I think, the intent on the part of the administration to do that. Whether they will succeed or not, I have no idea. Stay tuned. But that's what we need to observe.
Yeah, I'd like to add that they have strong democratic values. I think the people will react and will defend their democracy. I think authorities may change, but the democratic values are so inside of the society that whether because of fear or whatever the reason, you cannot see it right now, but it will prevail. I'm positive on that.
And with this, I think we come back on what we mentioned before already. It's the people and about the people. Yeah.
It is.
I think we have to come to a close very soon. I do not want to do that, and instead of doing a wrap-up by having a very short rapid-fire round with our three panelists. And the question would be, and please do it in one sentence. Not two, Kevin.
I failed the test already.
What is the single most important thing we can do to strengthen democratic resilience, as we talked a lot about it today? What is the single most important thing we can do? And we start with Veronica.
Education. And education, especially in two parts, media literacy and critical thinking. Make it short.
Very good. Julio.
Yes. Independence of justice systems. Because when courts and prosecutors are free from political pressure, every other democratic safeguard becomes possible.
And Kevin.
Focus on the rule of law, particularly judicial independence, and protect electoral integrity with your life.
Thank you. I think that has been a perfect sum up of an incredibly interesting, I think also fascinating panel. I would like to thank you, all the three of you, for having been here. Come a long way also to be with us today in this former prison that has helped us, I think, today to open our minds when it comes to democracy, and in particular, how do we talk about it? What do we mean by it? And I would, in particular, thank you, the three of you, for having been so concrete. This is a subject we can get very abstract about, but the way you did it, I think, was highly telling, clear, concrete, and my heartfelt thanks for that, and warm applause from the audience. Thank you.
Also, thank you very much from my part for this very interesting discussion on the panel, and also for all of you having been here on site and also online. Once again, a big thanks to the City of Bern. We do have some presents for the panelists later on, and the FDFA for this collaboration for today's event. It has already been said today, we live in a time when many things could divide us. Different political opinions, backgrounds, crises. This makes it all even more important that we all work together to strengthen democracies. I hope that this evening here today has contributed a bit to that effort. Our program in the Tower of Democracy continues tomorrow, Wednesday. We have the so-called Abstimmungsbüro, which could be translated as the voting office, where people with and without voting rights come together to discuss the upcoming votings we have in Switzerland. This event will take place tomorrow, Wednesday. If you do have time to join, please feel free. And now I invite you to join us one floor below at our Bar of Democracy to raise a glass and continue the discussion. Thank you very much for being here with us, and see you next time in the Tower of Democracy. Thank you very much.